1 year ago this month, Donald Trump called climate change a scam designed to make a lot of people a lot of money. Now his choice to be the director of the EPA, Oklahoma Attorney General Scott Pruitt, has said the debate over climate change is far from settled, making environmentalists concerned about how much the pending head of the Environmental Protection Agency actually wants to, protect the environment. This is all a nightmare, in particular, for our next guest, who quit his day job managing a billion-dollar investment firm to take up the fight against climate change full-time. Joining us now, philanthropist and environmentalist Tom Steyer. Mr. Steyer, thank you so much for joining us, as always.
Jake, thanks for having me.
So what do you think of Scott Pruitt?
Well, I think that Donald Trump has chosen someone to head the EPA who's been one of the leading opponents of the EPA. And I think that he's someone who's very close to corporate interests, and specifically oil interests. In fact, one of the biggest independent oil men in the United States of America, Harold Hamm, was the head of his election committee. So I think we can see exactly where the president-elect is going on this. He's appointing people to dismantle the agencies that they're scheduled to lead, to take their mission and flush it.
There are also reports that Congresswoman Cathy McMorris Rodgers may be nominated to head the Department of the Interior. I don't know what you think about her. Is she trying to dismantle the Department of Interior, you think?
Well, she's someone who's been active in supporting drilling off the coast. She's someone who has said about Al Gore that she'd give him an A for creative writing, but an F for science. So I think that she's very consistent with the rest of the president-elect's picks, in the sense that they're climate deniers who are absolutely opening up America to corporate interests at the expense of the American citizens.
Well, let's talk about the election. There may have never been two major party candidates with more divergent views on the environment in the history of our country. You supported Clinton. Donald Trump has suggested climate change is a Chinese hoax. How do you interpret these election results? The guy that you opposed with lots of money and lots of effort, he won.
Donald Trump is proposing something in terms of returning to a fossil fuel-driven economy that was successful and the dominant idea in the 1950s. So his goal is to return to a technology that was good 65 years ago and think that's going to lead us into the future. The fact of the matter is, Jake came out with a report 2 days ago showing that if we move to clean energy, it will create more jobs in America, that there'll be better paying jobs, that the America will grow faster and our costs will go down dramatically. So he's got an old technology that he's trying to push to please corporate interests at the expense of American working people and American citizens.
Well, with all due respect, a lot of working people just don't believe that argument. Take a listen to Hillary Clinton speaking in Ohio at a town hall in March.
I'm the only candidate which has a policy about how to bring economic opportunity using clean, renewable energy as the key into coal country, because we're going to put a lot of coal miners and coal companies out of business, right?
And she was talking about trying to bring new jobs, these clean energy jobs you're talking about, to coal country. But that comment hurt her in states that matter, such as Ohio. Is there a more effective way to talk about these issues, or is the policy the problem?
Oh, good grief. I think the fact of the matter is, people who work in the coal industry do it to support their families. They started in it, for the most part, when it was a vibrant industry. It's shrunk dramatically since then. And I think that the idea of not caring about working Americans in declining industries is something that is a huge mistake. The fact of the matter is, in Ohio, there are probably 25 times more jobs in clean energy than there are in coal. So we absolutely should be caring about working Americans who work in coal. We should absolutely care about parts of the country that are having economic problems, that are having problems growing and providing good-paying jobs. But the fact of the matter is, the numbers say that there are 60,000 coal miners in the whole of the United States. And in my home state of California, there are probably 550,000 clean energy jobs right now, 10 times the number of coal miners in the whole United States. So when we look forward, it is really important that we go area by area and show people what the actual jobs will be. And we should never take any pride in the fact that new technologies are going to replace old technologies, because there are people who are working those old technologies are hardworking Americans trying to support their families, trying to do it with dignity, And the fact of the matter is, the world is moving on, and we need, as a society, to take care of working people who have done very poorly over the last 35 years in the United States of America.
Tom Steyer, thank you so much.